Now, the recent protests against ICE operations that began in Los Angeles have spread across the country.
It started with a raid and ended with boots on the streets of Los Angeles. Families torn apart, protesters crying in the smoke, soldiers patrolling neighborhoods once filled with music and life. In 2025, the land of the free is asking a terrifying question. Is America turning its military against its own people? What began as a crackdown on immigration quickly spiraled into something far bigger. Tear gas in the air, National Guard convoys rolling past playgrounds, and for many, echoes of a darker, forgotten history. This isn't fiction. This is happening now, and the world is watching. Workers were dragged from their jobs in front of stunned co-workers. Mothers screamed as fathers were taken. Children cried as they watched their families being ripped apart. Some were undocumented, many were not. But none of that seemed to matter. Videos of the raids flooded social media. Shaky phone footage showing terrified faces, people bleeding, hands in the air. Within hours, the city erupted. What started as an immigration operation quickly lit the fuse of something far bigger, and LA would never be the same again. Police lines were drawn, roads were blocked, then came the first canisters of tear gas, hissing through the crowd like warning shots. The atmosphere shifted. Protesters pushed back, shouting louder. Some clashed with riot police. Dozens were arrested, some were injured. The city, once united in peaceful protest, began to crack under pressure. Barricades were broken, police vehicles were surrounded, and in some areas, anger boiled over into chaos. Windows shattered, fires were lit, helicopters circled above like vultures watching a wounded city. What began as a demand for dignity had now become a question of survival. No one knew what the next hour would bring, only that Los Angeles was now a battlefield not of weapons but of willpower. As the protests spread beyond control and night after night brought new waves of unrest, the governor of California issued an emergency request: send in the troops. Within 48 hours, Los Angeles witnessed something it hadn't seen in decades. Military convoys rolling through its streets. More than 4,000 California National Guard troops were mobilized. Alongside them, an additional 700 U.S. Marines, armed, trained for combat, and now stationed inside their own country. Checkpoints sprang up at major intersections. Military helicopters hovered above protest zones. In some neighborhoods, armored vehicles stood outside schools, grocery stores, and apartment buildings. Blending warlike imagery with everyday life, for many Angelenos, it was surreal. Children stared at soldiers through apartment windows. Families hesitated to step outside after dusk. Some called it protection. Others called it provocation. And while officials insisted the deployment was meant to restore order, civil rights groups warned, this isn't order, it's intimidation. What disturbed many wasn't just the sight of military boots on US soil, but the silence from Washington. No address from the president. No apology, no explanation. As the streets of Los Angeles filled with troops and armored vehicles, a deeper debate ignited across the country. Was this even legal? The deployment of over 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 U.S. Marines during a civilian protest raised urgent constitutional concerns. At the heart of the issue lies the Posse Comitatus Act, a law meant to prevent the military from acting as domestic law enforcement. While governors can legally call in the National Guard, the presence of active duty Marines blurred dangerous lines between civil authority and military power. Legal scholars warned this could set a disturbing precedent. Civil liberties organizations accused the government of violating the Fourth Amendment, citing unwanted search checkpoints and drone surveillance of protesters. Critics asked, was this truly an emergency or a misuse of... As politicians remained silent and federal agencies offered no clear justification, a chilling reality set in. If unchecked, this moment could open the door for future administrations to silence dissent with soldiers instead of dialogue. What's unfolding on the streets of Los Angeles isn't the first time America has turned its strength inward, but it may be one of the most unsettling in recent memory. 1992, when the Rodney King verdict sparked riots in Los Angeles, prompting the deployment of federal troops to control the chaos, each of these moments left a scar and a warning. The lesson: every time military force is used against US citizens, the line between democracy and authoritarianism grows thinner. Today, as armored vehicles roll through LA's Morse Mall, many fear history isn't just repeating, it's escalating. As military boots marched through Los Angeles and armored vehicles took positions on civilian streets, America didn't stay silent. The public's reaction was immediate and deeply divided. Across social media, a storm of outrage erupted. TikTok and Instagram were flooded with first-hand videos, children crying as troops passed their homes, activists being detained without charges, and peaceful protesters pleading for justice through clouds of tear gas. These raw, unfiltered moments painted a picture far more powerful than any headline. In cities like Chicago, New York, and Seattle, solidarity protests formed overnight. Vigils were held for those injured during clashes, while artists and musicians created songs, murals, and poetry capturing the fear and defiance pulsing through the nation. In front of federal buildings and state capitums, citizens gathered with signs that read, "This is not a war zone, this is our home, we are Americans. Why are you pointing guns at us?" Meanwhile, the mainstream media became a battleground its own. Left-leaning networks questioned the legality and ethics of the military deployment, calling it a dark day for civil liberty. Pundits compared the footage to war zones abroad, wondering aloud if democracy in America was faltering. On the other hand, some right-leaning outlets defended the decision, labeling the protests as domestic threats and praising the government for restoring order. Perhaps most striking was the emotional fatigue seen in everyday citizens. Parents debated whether to let their kids go outside. Teachers struggled to answer questions from students watching it all unfold in real time. Therapists reported spikes in anxiety, especially among immigrants and communities of color who feared they could be next. And while the nation watched, the world watched too often with disbelief. Foreign media painted the situation as a collapse of American ideals. European headlines read, "The US turns against its own. Democracy in crisis." In the end, the media didn't just report the crisis, it became a part of it. A mirror reflecting the pain, confusion, and fear of a nation struggling to decide, who are we, really? When the cameras stop rolling, as the dust settles over Los Angeles, one truth remains. This wasn't just a protest. This wasn't just a military deployment. This was a moment that tested the very soul of a nation. When the people raise their voices and the government answers with silence and soldiers, what happens next? That is up to us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. Thanks for watching.